Welcome to this week's episode of Eco Talk Rewired with all the news and talk from the industry. Welcome, Neil, to this week's episode of Eco Talk Rewired weekly news.
Morning, guys.
Got quite a few stories to go through today from the world of solar and global renewables. So, obviously,
as always.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an ever-changing market, isn't it? So, one of the big things that's been in the news this week is COP28.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is, quite a big event.
Yeah.
And it's always typically had a bit of an impact. It has over the last few years for us, isn't it?
Yeah, it has, yeah. Driving towards decarbonisation.
Yeah, so 118 countries pledge 11 terawatts by 2030. I mean, that's an awful lot of power, isn't it, Neil?
Yeah. Triple the target, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you look into the detail there, they talk about delivering 11 terawatts by 2030. It's not that far away. 6 years.
Yeah. It's not a long time.
Given the rate that things seem to be moving along, you can't. It does not fill me with a little bit of disbelief.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a bold statement here. They're also talking about, the deliverability of 1.2 terawatts of manufacturing of renewable tech by 2030, but we're not at that manufacturing state yet. So you're kind of looking at the numbers thinking, does that really add up? Are we able to actually physically manufacture that stuff to deliver it by 2030? So, I can't help but feel that there's some slightly politically charged statements
here. Yeah, I think, because we're going to touch on another couple of stories in a bit, and they're gigawatt projects. I mean, that's a big project, and we'll touch on that in a bit, but we're talking terawatts here.
Yeah.
That's a serious amount of power.
It is a lot of power.
But I know we were chatting just before we went live about in the end, China's got a massive impact on this 11 terawatts.
Yes,
China has got a massive impact on that market and set to do very well, very very well from it, aren't they?
They are. I mean, they're obviously a big contributor to what's being deployed. I think they're 230 gigawatts of deployment this year.
Yeah, that's right.
Which is pretty bold.
Yeah.
The fact is that they actually control 80% of the whole sort of manufacturing and supply chain for this. Ultimately, what we're saying is we're going to feed, based on those numbers, 11 terawatts of manufacturing into the Chinese, or 80% of 11 terawatts of manufacturing into the Chinese economy, which is already kind of world dominant, which is already kind of world dominance in everything that they do. China are looking to take over the world, and sounds to me like we're going to help.
We're talking billions of pounds, aren't we?
Yeah,
billions of pounds,
probably.
Trillions, possibly even trillions. You're right.
Yeah.
It's an awful
11 terawatts.
Yeah, it's an awful lot.
That's huge. That's probably something in the region of what a trillion a terawatt, something like that. It's something like that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Million a megawatt.
Maybe for the next week's episode, we'll get some statistics on that and what that approximately could look like as an actually investment costs.
Yeah.
Be quite an interesting thing to roughly work out that.
Yeah, it would. And that money's going straight into the Chinese economy, feeding their ever dominant sort of status in the world markets. Another thing that highlights this actually is who hasn't actually signed up to this agreement yet.
There's quite a few countries on the list. I'll just read them out, which is quite interesting. So we've got, obviously, China's not signed up.
Nope.
To COP. India. We've got Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand, Philippines, and then we've also got South Africa, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Russia, or Egypt. But we've got some serious players there, global players, that aren't signed up to, making our planet greener.
At least a couple of them are heavily led by the oil and gas industry, aren't they?
They certainly are. They certainly are. Obviously, Russia's massive.
Russia's oligarchs.
Yeah.
UAE, Saudi Arabia. They've probably got alternative motives than delivering renewable energy into the world market.
But it's quite strange how COP this time round has been held in Dubai.
I know. Funny that.
You weren't even a member. Yeah. So maybe it's a good opportunity for Dubai to network with more world leaders, and I don't know. There's
Yeah.
the
Dissuade them away from the renewables.
well, quite possibly it is,
or something going on behind the
quite
scenes. Who
possible.
knows? Yeah.
Who knows? It's but yeah, I just did think it was a little bit strange being held by.
Yeah.
You'd think they would hold it in member, countries of people, people who've signed up to the treaty in the end.
You think so?
They made that commitment.
Yeah.
But yeah,
clearly the world doesn't work like that, does it?
It doesn't work like that now.
Especially when the the Dubai chap or the Saudi Arabian chap that said that we're not going to be coming away from oil and gas.
Yeah, so one of the sheikhs.
Yeah,
I don't know. I'm not going to know exactly which sheikh it is and to pronounce his name correctly, but yeah, he made a statement saying that if we move away, we ain't going to be moving away from oil and gas anytime soon. If we do, we're going to move back to we're going to end up back in caves or back in the Stone Age or something. He said.
Yeah.
It's
his agenda is definitely charged.
Yeah, but the thing is, and we know. Yes, we need some. That we all need to move this way.
Yep.
But it's a phased approach. We can't just turn off. We can't all of a sudden just stop certain things because the world would just collapse. Overnight.
No, of course. It's going to take time, and I think the whole point of it, and coming back to the point, is it's to slow down the increase in the world's temperature.
Absolutely.
And put a cap on that increase of 2 degrees, and with a target of 1.5 degree increase over a period of time, and sort of an increase of 2 to 4% in overall worldwide deployment of technologies and stuff. So it is a staged and phased out approach. It's going to take a long time for us to get this.
It will do, and it's and hopefully, and then we'll go into some of the other stories shortly. And we touched on it last week with regards to planning and things. Hopefully, some of these bigger projects are going to be fast tracked through now because they are national projects of significance.
From a UK standpoint, we were talking last week that just to highlight kind of like the power needs worldwide. And what that 11 terawatt represents. I mean, we were talking about UK's 100 gigawatts of projects in pipeline that are being, released out of that sort of like approval stage pipeline. But that would represent a quarter of the UK's energy needs by 2050, which means that the UK needs 400 gigawatts of power by 2050. Well, there's nearly half a terawatt there. That's just the UK. We're only a little tiny island in the grand scheme of things when you compare us to the likes of India and Russia and America and China and all that, from a power demand standpoint. We're small and we're going to use that much power. So, the power that we need is massive worldwide, So
it's true.
Yeah.
So we'll move on to the next story.
Yeah.
So next story, Neil, is it's a pilot project in the Greater Manchester area that's received 19 million funding for solar and storage. So it's great to see these projects, coming on board, and it's especially pilot projects. I think you've got the local net zero accelerator pilots are operated by the Greater Manchester Combined Authority and the West Midlands Combined Authority. The former council received 7 million and the latter 10 million. With the money earmarked for use in installing new rooftop solar and battery storage and deploying new buses powered by electricity. So,
this is good. I mean, that's quite a lot of investment into an area, isn't it? Because that's into the Greater Manchester area, isn't it? So, I wonder where the other 2 million went. That's gone somewhere else, I suppose.
Yeah,
but, there's certainly a large portion of that assigned to those two bodies. I mean, you can do a lot. You can do an awful lot with £10 million investment into an area and infrastructure. There's a lot of solar panels. There's a lot of battery storage. There's a lot of electric vehicle charging stations and things. And there's probably quite a lot of buses, to be fair.
Yeah, I mean, I was in a meeting yesterday. I'm not going to name the meeting, but if anyone goes to my socials, we'll be able to see it. But there was not council. We had training providers and colleges who've accessed funding to provide sort of various different training aspects and things, and they're having to resort to advertise on local buses to spend the money.
Yeah,
they're actually going to obviously I get they've got to market them. They've got to do some marketing to spend the money, but you think that these pots of money exist to train people in renewable tech and train people into being able to do these types of projects.
Yeah,
and they're spending the money on advertising on buses and all sorts of stuff.
So they can spend the money.
Spend the money.
It's nonsensical, isn't it?
You know, I'm sure there's probably radio adverts and all sorts going on as well.
Yeah,
You know, but you know, you imagine how much of these projects is earmarked just for marketing purposes.
yeah, exactly. Proportions of budgets.
Yeah.
But the fact is, you know, for the local area, the money's there to gain for this skills development and things, and to gain these skills. So if you're in the market for wanting those skills and you want to learn, there's funding and finance.
Well, there's actually an awful lot of funding towards upskilling renewables and various different things. There's an awful lot of projects in the North Wales area at the moment, which is good, especially areas and across Wales, especially areas of deprivation. There's more funding towards helping people get into the sector there. So that's a great thing to see, and it was a very positive thing to see.
Well, we certainly need it if we're going to be part of any part of that target deliverability for the COP28, aren't we? We need a lot more people on the ground and a lot more happening.
We said that last week, didn't we? We said the amount of people we're going to need. Is crazy. So our next story is an important one, or a big one, should we say? I know you were showing me a graph before.
Yeah.
So MCS. So for anyone who's not aware of what MCS is a microgeneration certification scheme.
Yes.
It's been around since 2010, and it's been the go-to place for if you want to install small-scale renewables, you have to be accredited. Yeah. So for anyone who doesn't know what it means,
it's the governing body.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's a bit like what would be the NIC? People might think of the gas safe, NICIC, NAPIT of those sorts of electrical and gas worlds, I suppose.
Yes.
But this only specifically covers renewables. So they're celebrating 4,000 certified installers, contractors. Yes. And that's a staggering number.
That is nationwide.
I think that's higher than it was previous. I'm sure back in 2011 there was over 3,000, if I remember.
Yeah.
So
I suspect what we've seen in this industry, given the industry that we know being the solar coaster, I suspect that number dropped off.
Oh, it did, if I remember. So in 2011, there was over 3,000 installation companies.
Yep.
And then 2 or 3 years later, it was more like 500.
Yeah,
but
sounds
only
about right.
A small proportion of them were installing daily.
Yeah.
Some people just paid to keep their accreditation going.
Yeah.
But they weren't
active installers.
Yeah, non-practicing installers, if you want to call it. So that left quite a small percentage of people actively
still in the game.
Yeah.
I suspect a large portion of that 4,000 now are actually quite active.
Well, they're certainly trying to be active, aren't they?
Yeah. And we've seen a record-breaking year as far as renewable in deployment is concerned.
Yes, I think this year.
Yeah. So we've broke last year's numbers already. I mean, whatever the point of that sort of marker was, we'd already broken 2022's installation capacity. So obviously we're yet to finish 2023's installation deployment, but we're in a strong position. And I think the interesting thing is, from looking at the graph, there was a huge spike, as we all know, and expected back in the end of 2011 when the feed-in tariffs were ending. It was like huge swathes of deployment, very, very short-term kind of spike in the level of deployment. But it was a very small really small portion of the graph. It was just a big spike. But actually, annual deployment levels, and what we're seeing now is the level of deployment peak hitting the same as we were hitting in the feed-in tariffs in 2016.
Yeah,
we saw a steady drop off during once the sort of final tariffs dropped off and things. The industry, as we know, kind of just kind of run along in the background, taking over. And in these last few years, we've seen these huge levels of increase in rollout and deployment inquiries. We saw a massive level of inquiry increase, didn't we? But now we're up at an interesting peak again in the level of solar deployment. 130,000 properties deployed nationwide. I think this year.
There's still a lot of work to do, and I was talking to a lady from SB Energy yesterday.
Yes.
And in 2010, they had 900 DNO applications.
Yeah.
So if anyone doesn't know who's listening, watching, whenever we connect a certain size system to the grid, we have to apply for permissions.
Yep.
In 2010, that year, they had 900 applications. In 2011, they had 9,000 applications.
Yeah.
So it goes to show. And, that's a massive thing to try and scale from a business point of view, how they deal with that.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, that must have been a challenge. But
Yeah.
we'll drop on to SB Energy at the end actually, because I had a really good chat with SB Energy yesterday, and so some interesting things they're doing, which comes into the news topic anyway. But yeah, so 4,000 installers. But going back to one of our previous talks, Neil, how many of those are going to be good installers? How many are going to be rogue installers?
Yeah, this is it, isn't it? There is 4,000 installers. You've still got to be diligent, haven't you? Because there's people who are just new to the game. They don't know the pitfalls or the failings of what they're doing, and just plod along blindly. So there's an awful lot of that going on in this industry.
It'd be interesting to see the split actually, in how much are heat pumps, how much is solar.
Yes,
because obviously, or if you look at the media, heat pumps this, heat pumps that. In the meeting I was at yesterday, there was an awful lot of heat pump mention, and obviously Ep.4 is obviously heavily heat pump, focused now.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing an awful lot of those MCS companies are probably going to be heat pump contractors.
Yes.
As well as solar, I think, because people are gearing up for the whole heat pump rollout.
Well, there's the heat pumps kind of geared behind this sort of Ep.4 deployment as well.
Yeah.
That's created a huge kind of spike in interest in joining the market to deliver the product, because it's a winner all around for everybody, isn't it? Really, the homeowner's getting free install stuff, and the installer's getting paid for doing the work. So, yeah, of course, it's going to create a big interest in that area of the business. So you're going to get a lot of new people joining the business and stuff. So, it just doesn't ever change, does it? It's really, really important to be very careful who you're selecting to mess about with your property and install technology. There's some companies that are just going to mess about, and it's going to show in the installation, and there's some other companies that are going to care about what they're doing. And it's just very, very important to sort of make sure you pick the latter, really, and make sure you get somebody who gives,
This is a bit off topic. What's your personal opinion on heat pumps?
That's the reason we don't install them at the minute, isn't it? I just feel that there are just little gaps in that technology, more importantly at the time of the year when you really need them. So that sort of temperature coefficient, when you're in that sort of, in those sort of minus temperatures, a heat pump can struggle to deliver anything more than kind of ambient heat. You need a lot more of an ambient heat in the house when it's freezing outside. And I've heard reports of that from customers who've got them, and it doesn't quite do what it needs to do at certain times of the year. It's fine for most of it, but when it really matters, it's questionable. And I see a huge upturn in consumption of electricity and things. So I just feel that we're probably a couple of years, if not a little bit longer, off that technology being where it needs to be to actually solve the problem entirely. There's just shortfalls.
I feel very similar, to be honest. I don't think heat pumps are the right answer. I think in some situations, maybe. I think there's an awful lot of poor installations, and I'm sure we might have some heat pump manufacturers and installers watching this podcast who, and if you do, then leave a comment in what you think. But these are our opinions. When we've been in this game, and within a few years period, many years ago, I installed about 100 heat pumps. So I know it. I've done it before, but they do have their pitfalls. I don't think they're the ultimate solution. I think the government's pushing them a bit like electric cars.
Yeah.
That it's been made. It's that golden ticket. This is the answer, but it's not the ultimate answer. And I think consumers are going to get hammered with electricity bills.
Yep.
There's going to be systems that are poorly installed, which are going to cost people more money to run.
Yep.
The efficiencies are questionable. I personally think there's a better way of doing it.
I think it's appropriate measures in appropriate situations.
100%.
If you've got a passive house or a brand new built house with proper insulation that's built to all the latest best building regulations, you stick an SOS heat pump in it that sized correctly to the property, it's going to be absolutely fine. It's probably going to be brilliant. But you stick an SOS heat pump retrospectively in an old, thick stone Welsh built property, the radiators need resizing.
Yeah.
You've got no insulation in the property. Everything's kind of mismatched. Those environments, especially, and stuff in between. It's not the right answer. It's something else, and I think it's a combination of factors to solve the whole, isn't it? And it's like when we look at installing for a property, solar is part of the puzzle to solve the energy problem in a property. Solar's technology, just the solar panels, for example, they produce power when they produce power. Daylight conditions, we still use power at night, so that's where the battery comes in. And it's that whole kind of combination of technologies to make the whole thing work, really. Heat pumps will be part of the mix, part of the solution, but it's not the answer across the board. And I think that's the issue, because it's being fitted as an answer across the board, and it's not. So,
and I just think there's better technologies out there, and we'll touch on them another time. But I think there's better technologies out there that can, and different combinations of tech that can do the same thing.
Yeah.
And be less risky and potentially cheaper to install.
Yeah.
I personally want to chat to a couple of local housing associations, in conjunction with some maybe AMRC, their research facility, and see if we can get two houses side by side, one with a heat pump, and one with something that we as an organisation are going to recommend that they do, and put them side by side and see which ones affect, and compare the two.
Efficiency, carbon reduction, etc.
I mean, the downside is you're going to have two. You've got to find two properties in theory that are basically obviously the same construction-wise, but that the profiling of the user is similar as well. So obviously that's going to be different. You can't have one with a single occupant and the other one a family of six.
No,
that's not going to work.
Either that, or you've got to do it in lab conditions.
Yes, yeah. So that's something I want to look at, because I feel that I've got a winning solution that could be used that doesn't necessarily use a heat pump. But it needs a forward-thinking sort of housing association organisation to embrace it, and then in conjunction with a university or research facility like AMRC to actually measure it and prove it. But again, it comes under R&D and getting the right solution. So, but yeah, it's a big one. Next story is planning permission. So we've always had some challenges with planning permission, and it's a shame they haven't gone far enough, I think, with this whole planning permission, Neil. I mean, so there's no longer planning for flat roofs in the UK.
Nope.
Great.
Brilliant. Shouldn't have been in the first place.
Yeah, but for me, it doesn't go far enough. I just think they've missed. This whole meter rule is a load of rubbish.
It's ridiculous.
I know under MCS we're supposed to leave a bit of a space on the outside edge and things, but why on a commercial have we got a meter? Okay, if it's for access, for maintenance, okay, I get it, but that's fine if you're on a big steel profile roof.
Yeah,
I completely get it. Makes sense. But when you're looking at some of the commercial, it's that rule doesn't fit everything, does it?
One rule fits all. It
doesn't
fit all
work.
No, exactly that.
We've done so many projects where you might be a hotel with a slate roof.
Yeah.
You're not going to walk on the slate roof. You can't access round it anyway. It doesn't make sense. So if you're ever going to maintain that roof, you're going to have a scaffold up and it's going to be done properly. But so the meter rule doesn't work.
No.
So
you just need enough clearance at the edge of the panel so the water runs properly down the roof.
It's positive. I just think it's for me, it's not gone far enough. No. I think there's still work that needs to be done by UK government on the planning, at smaller scale installations to make it more easy to roll out.
What is good though is we used to have planning up anything above 50 kilowatts. That was then moved to anything above a megawatt, which is a pretty big installation.
Big system,
That's a big company that's going to need a megawatt power and above. But now there's no planning required for anything.
That's great. It is good. It's great. But I still feel that lower end market, they just haven't gone quite far enough.
No, I agree. The upper end market, right? That's good. But in that lower end piece, that whole meter rule thing, that kind of a really limiting factor. The whole point of putting solar on a roof is to make that step into a sustainable future for that particular business. If you got a long roof with not so high apex, gutter to apex measurements, you take a meter out of that, that has a monumental impact
Yeah.
in what you can actually physically install to help solve the problem for that particular business. And it has very limited and impeding factors in the whole sort of rollout and sort of the whole point of all this. And it just seems to be bureaucratic to
It
me.
is, and I think really this news story doesn't really affect us because we've been, obviously, for anyone who's watching doesn't know, we've been doing this nearly 15 years.
Yeah.
And back in 2010, 11, we actually designed our own flat roof system.
Yep.
Because Wales planning law said you couldn't go more than 200 mil off the highest point, off the roof. So anything over that, you need planning. So we designed a flat roof system that sat under planning.
Yep.
Which we've used for many, many years. And it's a really, really good solution, and we always have used it, and it's it's arguably better than what's on the market and better made. But
makes for a neat system, doesn't it?
It is so really it doesn't really affect us because we've been fitting anyway.
The bit that does is that meter rule.
The meter rule causes so many problems.
It affects our customers.
It does because again the frustrating thing is, and it goes back to something we'll mention about SB Energy at the end, is we've got all this talk of like everyone trying to like decarbonize, net zero, all this, but you've got customers wanting to spend the money, wanting to decarbonize their business, and put the necessary amounts of panels on their roof to have a good impact. Yeah. They can't put as many on because of stupid planning laws, or there's restrictions from the grid. And this is the frustrating thing. It's all talk, and there's still too many sort of silly restrictions around. I mean, the worst one I found was when we did the nursing home in Llandudno for Royal Masonic Benevolent Institute, QE Court. Massive bungalow type property. It's a big, obviously single-story building. It's like a giant bungalow. And
so you've got a low apex to go to measurement.
And they wanted to fit more solar on there. We ended up scaling it back because they wanted it installed quickly, but didn't want to go through planning because they were concerned that it would get knocked back and they couldn't have it. So we ended up just fitting a smaller system that complied with planning. And and the local I spoke to the local council and they were like, oh, well, just put in a planning application or it's like, well, no, because then you just want the fees.
It's counterintuitive.
You just want the fees, we're going to put an application in for you to say, just to have a look and go, yeah, it's fine. Well, what a waste of 3 months. And all because you want the fees. It's like, you can't knock it back because, it's green, renewable tech. It's the nearest house is probably 250 meters away. It's not overlooked. It's not, it's just so frustrating.
Not that the solar is anything outside of the ordinary these days.
Well, no, exactly. This is the thing. It almost still is treated like that. It was in some respects, isn't it?
It is, It
should be. And hopefully we'll see more and more of planning conditions being relaxed.
They need to be.
They do. There's still more to be done.
Take the stumbling blocks out of the way.
Still more.
Let's expedite this stuff because if the world's got to hit an 11 terawatt target, and if we're succumb to these little issues, there'll be something in America, there'll be stuff in China, there'll be little things that are holding this up, and it's the smaller stuff that's holding the big picture up, isn't it? Little things getting away, big opportunities,
Yeah. So planning is still a big problem, I think.
Yep.
It's getting better, but it's still not quite there.
No.
The next one is an inside perspective on the. So there's 2 projects here we're talking about here. So there's, and we're talking about them collectively because what's really interesting is 2 projects of the NSIP,
Nationally Significant Infrastructure Projects.
That's the one.
Yeah.
But it's great. We've got 2 big solar projects. You've got 840 megawatt Botley West solar farm.
Yeah.
And then there's another gigawatt solar farm. So it's great to see these projects coming online, and and like under that sort of categorization, like you were saying before off air, it's like an airport. It's a national significant project, isn't it?
It's a national significant project, so it falls outside of the normal localized planning restrictions. Because it's important nationally. I mean, these are big projects. I mean, one of the gigawatt project there, one of the things is they identified a hole in that sort of grid area around Nottinghamshire. So I think it's the Great North Road Solar Park, I think it's called. There was a coal power plant there.
Okay.
which was polluting the environment.
Right.
And that coal power plant shut down, and now there's going to be a gigawatt
Ah.
of renewable energy going into place. So now you've got less phosphates going into the rivers, you've got less pollutants going on. The rivers, the environment's going to be a nicer place. But now you've bridged the gap in that sort of grid infrastructure with that sort of scale of project. The sheep can still graze under the panel. It helps nature. The bees can still create their own. It solves the puzzle, but it doesn't have the same damaging effects as the old coal power plants, and nature can still evolve around it. They're saying that because of the scale of the project and some of the things that they're doing within that project, they're going to do some different stuff. Whereas if they might uncover an architecturally significant site, they can actually turn it into bring in some tourism into the area.
Yeah, I mean,
roll that into the project.
These are big projects. I mean, we were chatting before. Wilver Power Station up in North Wales, which is that is. I think we look. It was two 490 megawatt reactors.
Yeah.
So it's effectively it's about a gig.
Yeah.
So what these two solar farms are equivalent to two Wilver Power Stations.
Exactly. And Boris, when he was in power at that point, he promised 10 nuclear power plants, which had effectively been about 10 megawatts, 10 gigawatts of deployment. That's going to take a long. I mean, these aren't going to happen overnight. Don't get me wrong.
No, of course.
That's a long-term project. 10 separate nuclear power plants, 10 gigawatts of nuclear power plant, with all the things that come along with a nuclear power plant. Gareth, you did some work in Wilver.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, and what a horrific place it was. It was one of the worst experiences of my life.
Scary.
It was literally like The Simpsons.
Was it?
It was so. I was working for the national contractor who unfortunately no longer around, but they had the contract to do so. Back in 2004-ish, maybe.
Yeah.
They were told, maybe slightly earlier. Wilver were told that by the nuclear authority, if you do X, Y, and Z, we'll let you stay open a bit longer. Because the plant was coming to its end.
Yeah.
Obviously, safety protocols were creating things they had to improve. And so one of the projects I was involved on was called Gas Boundary Circulation Reinforcement.
Okay.
So at the bottom of each reactor, there was a giant spinning shaft where they'd inject carbon dioxide into, and that's what it had a giant shaft which would circulate the CO2 around the reactor.
Okay.
But it was the weak point in the reactor, and I think there'd been an incident somewhere else, and what you could get is a hot gas steam release out of because there's a number of seals where this shaft goes into the nuclear reactor,
right?
Then obviously linked to an external motor.
Okay.
And so part of the project is we were having to build almost like a little room around this where this shaft entered the nuclear reactor into the bottom of the reactor.
Yeah.
And so I had to I had this special device back then that we used to like X-ray all the concrete walls to determine where all the reinforcement was. So when we drilled and we put drilled and put a bolt onto the wall, a fixing plate.
Yeah.
You weren't going to hit the steelwork. You had to go in between, but there was that much steelwork, so that was a bit crazy. But
sounds scary.
Yeah, and the idea is if there was ever a hot gas steam release, someone would go on a suicide mission because they'd have to go into this room and manually close this valve.
Oh my God!
But that room would be potentially full of reactive hot gas steam.
Yeah, yeah.
Because it was the only way. That was the fail safe if it ever failed. Because if it escaped, then it'd get into the rest of the building where the equipment and things were. So that was one of the things. But I remember, so I had practically access all areas.
Yeah.
And the reactor buildings are massive. What you see, if you ever drive past Wilver, is you've got at least another third to a half underground.
Okay.
It's semi-buried. So an awful lot of, obviously, earth and rock has been dug out to construct those reactor buildings. So, you could walk around there for hours. It was that big. You never see anyone. It was. It's almost like the place was closed. Obviously, it was a 24-hour operation. Yeah. You walk around for hours, never see anyone. Then next time you'll be walking around the corridor, you got someone fast asleep in a windowsill. But because people used to go and hide, it was that big. You see, people just go hide in places. But
That does sound like The Simpsons.
yeah, so the building was like circles. It was like, because obviously the buildings are round,
Yeah.
and everything's built around the reactor. So there's various different levels, floors, and each so at the bottom, so wherever you got the reactor, you'd have like a single skin brick wall.
Yeah.
And then you'd have like a plant room with equipment in it. And what the project was, if there was ever again a hot gas steam release, we had to reinforce the brick walls with reinforcement. Yeah. And again, I had to survey the walls of all the equipment that was on the walls. So I was going into all these rooms, and I remember going into one room, and there's water dripping from a pipe, and the gauge is doing this. And I'm like, I'm not supposed to be doing that. It was just because it's radiation, you can't see it.
No.
And they fill you with all these stories about. There was one story that I got on a training. There's obviously a lot of training and things to go and work in a nuclear power plant. There was a guy in China who had picked something off the floor. Goes, well, that's interesting. Picked it up and put it in his pocket. A few days later, he was in hospital because he was having his leg amputated because it was highly radioactive.
Oh my God!
But he just thought, that's quite unique. Something. I wonder what that is, and I picked it up. And you can't see it. So whenever you have to go into the building, you get scanned for radiation. You have to put your hands, a bit like in the airport.
Yeah.
You get scanned for radiation and things. And but you just don't know. It's like when I was in that room with the gauges doing this, and water dripping from pipes. It's like, that's why I say it was like The Simpsons.
Water dripping from pipes is not a good scenario.
Well, it's not really, no, because is it radioactive water?
Something's not sealed.
So it just.
Did you must have given you Geiger counters and stuff?
No.
Oh my God.
That's the problem. That's what just scared me about the places. You just couldn't see stuff. You didn't know, and literally I could just roam around on my own in there, and like you didn't. It's very easy to get lost in there and end up somewhere you shouldn't be. Do you know what I mean? And what is impressive is just to sort of finish on this was the very bottom of the reactor building. They call it the Hanging Gardens,
right?
Because so the reactor is effectively not quite a concrete ball, but it's a concrete surrounded cylindrical shape, but it's wrapped in it's got steel rope tension bars.
Okay.
Wrapped around it, obviously, because it slightly expands and contracts with heat. So the steel ropes are there to obviously stop it from exploding, to keep it all together. And then underneath they call it the Hanging Gardens because that's where all the steel ropes are sort of terminated. So when you go into that building, I've still got vivid memories of it now. Going into it, it's so dark and eerie.
Yeah, I bet it is.
And it was quite quiet, weirdly. And you can just sort. It was a crazy place. Crazy place.
Yeah. The thing is, you install a nice gigawatt solar farm that's going to deliver the same level of sort of peak capacity. You don't have any of that. Well,
no, but if you look at Wilver as a project, I know they're obviously looking at Wilver too, and I think that's something that might happen still now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not confirmed, but it's looking potentially likely. You look at the road infrastructure, to go and build. Look at Hinkley. The amount of money, we're talking billions and billions of pounds to build a nuclear power plant. Solar is a lot. And don't get me wrong, I know solar doesn't work at night. Before we get attacked in the comments, we're gonna, it's so much you can deploy so much power more cost effectively than you can in a nuclear. And again, it's all part of that energy mix, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
But
the thing is, I mean, so it doesn't produce power at night, but the thing is, the country uses more power in a day anyway.
Yeah.
So that's one of the gaps that we've got to fill. It's part of the solution. We're not saying solar's the whole solution. It's part of the mix, isn't it? It's the same as these residential scenarios. It's part of the greater good. It's part of the mix. The wind's going to be a big thing in there. The hydrogen eventually is going to be a big thing. Battery energy storage solutions, the BES, that's the big grid scale stuff. That's part of the mix and balancing the power on the grid. One of the things with the grid is it's the balance of power, isn't it? And when we actually use the power versus we're able to produce the power, but we're actually using it in peaks, and it's balancing that's half the problem, I think. So
I'll tell you what has gone quiet though is these did they call them SBRs? These nuclear reactors, these submarine reactors.
Right. Okay.
That seems gone really quiet because they were looking at Charles Venice for that, weren't they?
Right. Yeah.
It was one of their pilot projects.
Yeah.
So using old nuclear, or I think they were former submarine reactors.
Yeah.
as sort of mini nuclear power plants,
Okay.
and using the existing infrastructure at sites like Charles Fun, where you've got a decommissioned plant. It's got all the infrastructure there, isn't it?
Yeah, it has, yeah.
To put in a small mini reactor.
Okay.
So that seems gone quiet. Maybe we should try and get an update on that.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what's going on with that, I suppose.
And then just to conclude, so yesterday I was at a meeting, and SB Energy were there, and they did a presentation, and two nice ladies. What the main lady who did the presentation, she was like the liaison officer type. She'd been with SB Energy for 33 years. She's been there a long time. Wow. So she's seen some major significant changes and learned quite a lot in a 20-minute presentation actually about SB Energy, and she was saying that because SB Energy also look after Scotland, Scottish Power. Yeah. But she was saying that the ran as two separate businesses completely. She isn't even actually allowed to communicate with somebody in Scottish Power, residential. They're literally because they're audited by Ofgem.
Yeah.
They have to go through a certain channel if they want to make have a conversation with somebody. They literally can't just coordinate direct. So that was quite interesting. And something else I learned: the power network in Scotland is different to here in the northwest. So in Scotland, they've got a bit like the old Christmas tree lights. One goes out, they all go out.
Right.
So all their substations are on that.
They're in series.
Yeah. So if one goes out, they all go out.
Oh my god.
So that was really interesting. But the Northwest network's on a different. She did say what it was called, but I can't remember. But each substation in the Northwest area generally has two feeds going to it. So if one of the feeds goes down, one of the split, they've still got backup. So that's why in our area we don't tend to get as many issues.
Yeah.
So that was quite interesting to read and to listen to, and but I shared my frustrations with her at the end of the presentation with regards to some of the challenges we've been getting with DNO, and so it was interesting to hear their side of things. 100%, they're massively at the moment looking at their 10-year plan. So I said to them, you should be engaging with the installation network.
Yeah.
We're the guys who are going out seeing businesses, talking to businesses, quoting them, and
we know what kind of volume is about to
exactly. Yeah. And so they're like, yeah, brilliant. We need to speak to people like you because we need to understand what potentially is going to happen in this area, what people are planning.
Yeah.
They hate heat pumps, absolutely hate heat pumps because of the power.
Yeah.
Obviously not a massive fan of EV charging because again the demand.
Yeah.
And what they do find currently frustrating is if the domestic installation ticks various different boxes, you don't actually have to notify them of electric car charging point.
Yeah.
If the installation company recognises there could be an issue with if you have an electric car charger, it's going to go over the incoming breaker value.
Yeah.
Then they need to know
60, 80, 100 amps.
Yeah.
Yep.
So they're going to need to know, and you need to put a DNO application in. But you've seen again thousands of EV chargers being fitted. They're not aware of them.
No consultation whatsoever.
Nothing.
Yeah. The thing is, with everything going electric, and if you've got a very modern house now, air source heat pump, electric vehicle charger, induction hobs and things, electric showers, potentially a hot tub, sauna, swim spa, all these things kind of draw in power. Very quickly you get towards 100 amp supply.
You do,
if you're not careful,
some of these bigger properties, you're talking 3-phase, aren't you?
Yeah.
But so that was really interesting. And another thing she said to me was, whenever they have, obviously they can detect issues in the grid.
Yeah.
And something else is just coming to my mind. Actually, I'll touch on it in a minute.
Yeah.
But when they have an issue in a particular street, they drive down the street at night, one of their engineers, and they'll look out for lights, little blue lights, little green lights on the side of people's houses.
Yeah.
Maybe a Tesla plugged in, and obviously there are other car brands available. They see if they look out for electric cars. Who's charging an electric car? And that's where they start to dig up the road first to find the problem.
Wow.
Because it's typically the electric car that's pulling so much juice through that bit of cable, and that's what's causing a bit of a problem somewhere.
Wow.
So that was quite interesting to hear their side of some of the challenges they're facing. And it's that they're just massively recruiting. They just haven't got enough people. They just haven't got enough people to.
It's representative, isn't it? Because if you look at the level of deployment we're trying to achieve, and the numbers are getting ramped up, and MCS have hit 4,000 installers, and all of this stuff is power going onto the grid. It's either demand from an air source heat pump or solar delivering power. It's one way or the other. The infrastructure of the grid is because this is why we face challenges, isn't it? Because the grid infrastructure is not up to spec in certain environments.
I mean, they love solar. They say they love solar, and I discussed them how we design our systems, and we've spoke about that on previous podcasts, and they were like, "That's music to our ears."
Yeah,
you know, because I said to them, I said one of my first opening comments after they did the presentation was, the answer is and always has been, installing a system to be and using all that power at the source.
Yes. On
that property.
Use it.
That's the answer.
Yeah, it is.
It always has been the answer.
Of course it has.
Rather than it being distributed on the network.
Yeah.
And
rather than fill the roof for the sake of filling the roof.
Exactly, and then this is what I said to them. I said, we're winning business because companies are over specifying project, and they're like, great, it's exactly what we want to hear, is people like yourselves saying those sorts of things, because they are seeing companies being massively over specified, which then cause an export issues again on the grid.
Yes.
Rather than something that's sized to suit the incoming needs, which is perfect for what they want.
Yeah.
So, it was interesting.
We should mean that we get no issues getting our DNO.
Well, in theory, not. You're right.
In theory, but it doesn't necessarily work like that, does it? It's
crazy. It doesn't. I think that's where it needs to change, doesn't it? And that's where going back to the planning, they're making some positive change, but they're still not doing enough to. They're talking a good game, but not quite.
But the actions aren't following at the same speed. It's going to take a little while before the action catch up with the chit chat at the front end, I think. And I think that's happening. I think that's even represented. That takes us right back to the beginning of what we're talking about. This whole COP scenario. They're talking a brilliant game.
Yeah.
But when you strip that back, in UK nationally, internationally, there are issues along the way that need addressing, and the little hurdles that are still in the way that they've failed to take out of the way to actually let this stuff just roll out and happen. SP Energy's national grid infrastructure issues are part of that end game, aren't they? And there's struggles, isn't there?
And lastly, on the SP Energy side, you'll be amazed at this, right?
Yeah.
They do not have any monitoring on their substation level.
Oh my God.
Yeah. They're only now looking to deploy it.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
We all know how that individual monitoring makes a difference, right?
Yeah. I couldn't believe when she said it. I thought you'd think someone like SP Energy would be monitoring the demand at substation level. They don't. So one substation, she was telling me yesterday at this meeting, will do about 300 homes, one substation.
Yeah.
But they don't have the usage profiles, the demand profiles. They have no idea what that substation's doing. And the only time, right, it only gets checked if there's a problem.
Yeah.
Otherwise, an engineer will go out once a year, just to because it's like a generation meeting, isn't it? Like we see in solar. You'll go there. They'll go to that substation once a year, just to read the meter basically and just check everything's okay.
So they've not even
That's all they do.
They've not even got smart metering on their own substations.
Yep. No.
That's crazy,
isn't it?
It's crazy. Yeah. Because the tech's there.
Well, you just think that'd be something they would have.
Yeah. How can they say yes or no to an application when they don't actually know what capacity they
exactly. This is the thing. There's definitely some holes in the whole sector.
Yeah. Some big ones that need plugging quickly.
Yeah. But I think that wraps up this week's episode of Eco Talk Rewired. And follow, like, share. If there's any comments you've got on anything we've said today, we've made some interesting comments today. Whether you agree or not, you might be a heat pump installer and completely disagree with what we're saying. But we'd love your feedback, love your comments, and we'll see you next week for Eco Talk Rewired Weekly News.